Could you give me your full name, please?
Beverley Gale Allit.
Your date of birth, please?
4th of the 10th, 1968.
Terrible crimes took place at the hospital.
In 3 months, 4 children died, 9 fell suddenly ill.
I'm really going to give a harmful drug to a tiny little helpless baby.
He was cold, clammy, lifeless.
Insulin's a terrible murder weapon.
The children are disposable.
One name kept coming up, Nurse Beverley Allit.
Beverley Allit, a 22-year-old who had never been in trouble with the police before.
Bloody psychopath.
I didn't do it. I wouldn't dream of doing it to anybody.
And you've now got a golden opportunity to tell the truth.
I'm telling the truth. The God's honour truth.
Well, hello.
Hello, Michelle, how are you?
I'm all right, nearly.
You
How are
look
you? Long
absolutely
time.
great.
Thank you. I see you've not lost your charm. You're looking well.
And so are you. So
I think you're looking better than what you did when you was at work.
Well, I am better than when I was
Yeah,
at
well,
work.
no stress, is there?
So do you remember all this?
How can you not?
Especially when I saw these pictures of the children. I can remember nearly every one, you know.
Yeah, it's surprising how it sticks with you.
It does. Well, you're never going to forget it, is it?
No,
We lived it for, 18 months?
absolutely. This interview is being recorded. I am Policewoman 489 Billingsley, stationed at Grantham. My colleague is...
Neil Jones, Detective Inspector.
What's your full name, please?
Beverley Gale Allit.
Your occupation and your home address.
I'm road nurse, Grantham, Lincolnshire.
So I'm Neil Jones, and I was a DI at Boston in Lincolnshire, and I was a team leader on the Beverley Allit murder inquiry.
Michelle Billingsley. At the time, I was a policewoman working on what we call the Family Service Unit at Grantham Police Station. The police were called to the hospital at the end of April in 1991. The hospital were concerned about the number of incidents, for want of a better word, that had been occurring on Ward 4 of Grantham Hospital, which was the children's ward. Some children on there had had several significant sort of episodes that were not natural or didn't appear to be natural, attacks, breathing difficulties, some collapses, and unfortunately some deaths. They were concerned because of the number of children that these incidents had been happening to.
The pathologists were saying we're doing too many post-mortems on children. Children were being transferred to the Queen's Medical Centre. The paediatric department over at the Queen's were getting suspicious that there was just too many things happening and there was too many children, because it was only an 8-week period.
I remember being on duty in May of 1991. My boss went up and had a meeting with various officials from the hospital and said, I've been having a chat. There are some strange happenings, for want of a better term, that have been occurring on the children's ward at the hospital. They've no idea what's causing it. I've no idea what's causing it. But what I'd like you to do is to get up to the hospital and see what you can find out. And I distinctly remember him saying that morning, this will be about a 3-day inquiry. And so off to the hospital we went, not having a clue as to what we were going to find and what we were going to come across, really. He put together a very small team, initially from my unit, the Family Service Unit, and asked us to go to Ward 4 at Grantham Hospital just to make general inquiries of the nursing staff, some of the parents of the children that had been involved. On a fishing expedition, really, just to see if we could establish what was happening. We had no idea what we was looking for. I mean, it had been suggested that there might be some medical reason that was responsible for these attacks. Another train of thought was that there was a bug at the hospital, an innocent bug that was causing these collapses, and we had no idea what we were looking at that stage.
It has become a long and complicated police and medical investigation. Until experts from both sides meet here this afternoon, no one is certain if the mystery deaths and illnesses on the children's ward were natural or sinister.
The detective superintendent decided he needed a team at Grantham of detectives. He said, we've got this case on the ward. And then, of course, he gave us this bombshell, really, about the fact that 23 attacks had happened over a short period of time, over 8 weeks, and that 13 children may have been attacked.
My name's David Crampton. I'm the father of Paul Crampton. Paul was admitted to Grantham Hospital in the early part of 1991, 5-month-old at the time, with a chest infection. When we took Paul into hospital, Ward 4 seemed a happy, friendly, bright place. Hospitals with children's drawings and things on the wall. But I do remember there were moments of rust and trauma within the hospital. Clearly, children were ill, and we saw moments of frantic action.
My name's Paul Swanak, and I used to live in Grantham. In '91, my son was admitted to Ward 4 in Grantham Hospital with asthma. He'd had asthma for quite a bit, and my wife, ex-wife, at the time, knew that it was going to be bad. Obviously, being his mother, you know, she knew more than anybody. And it was from there that we decided to take him to the hospital, and where he was admitted to A&E. And after, I don't know, half an hour in there, and was admitted to Ward 4. That was my time when I thought the worst was going to happen.
Paul had been in hospital a few days, and on the Saturday, we were told that Paul would be able to come home the next day. So clearly that was a happy event. The worry had now subsided. I went off with the 2 older children to go to the supermarket. And when I returned, I walked into the Ward 4 at Grantham Hospital, to a scene that I wasn't expecting, a very scary scene. Paul was laid in the arms of one of the nurses, and he was cold, clammy, a little lifeless. And I remember that Nurse Allit was in the room at the time, and I remember her saying, "This child is hypo," which I later found out was a reference to hypoglycemia, suffering from low blood sugar.
This interview is being recorded. I am Detective Sergeant Smith, stationed at Grantham Police Station. My colleague present is
Neil Jones, Detective Inspector.
Paul Crampton, who was a baby on the ward from about the 20th of March. Do you remember that child being on the ward?
Yes, I do.
And what was his basic problem?
It was wheezy. It was wheezy. I don't know whether they were suspecting a chest infection or...
Did you consider him at that time as a very sick baby?
Not as sick as some of them thought coming.
Was it life-threatening, his
No.
wheeziness?
No.
Tuesday the 7th of May, I, with another officer, went to Ward 4 at the hospital. And I actually saw Beverley Allit that day. That's the first time I ever came across her. I recall that she came into one of the side offices wearing a uniform, sat down, and we proceeded to ask her some questions, as we had done with other nurses. She was very pleasant girl, seemed quite quiet. She seemed quite willing to talk, to help with the inquiry. And it's fair to say that on that day, when I took her first witness statement, she didn't appear to be any different to any other nurse or doctor that had been previously seen by others and myself on that ward.
And can you remember about what time young Paul came into the ward?
It was on the ward when we were sat at the station. As soon as we'd go on duty, we'd sit at the nurse's station to have a report. We just get a chair and sit down. He was in room 1, and his mum was in there. And they just told us we had an admission and what it was. No name. And then they asked me if I would go to X-ray with him. This was after report.
At that point, a doctor was called, eventually arrived, and Paul was taken into the recovery room, and doctor gave him treatment. I can't remember how long it was, but sometime afterwards we were invited into the treatment room, and Paul was sat up playing with his toes. An apparent total recovery from this child that was grey, clammy, suffering from a hypoglycemic attack. We had no reason to believe there was going to be another attack. The staff in Ward 4, children's ward at Grantham Hospital, were like you would expect any staff in any hospital to be, and in particular a child's ward. They were caring people who were willing to talk to you, clearly recognised that you would be concerned about a child that's in hospital, so they're exactly what you would have expected. Good, decent people trying to do a job and do it well and proficiently.
Everybody on that ward knows how much my nursing means to me.
Does it mean a lot to you?
Yes, it does. It means more than bloody anything. It means more than living.
I thought it was a magic place. I did, honestly. The staff were absolutely brilliant, and the ward itself, all the staff were friendly. It was a heartwarming place to go into, and there was more hope than sadness, if you know what I mean. But after a few days, it got to people really being irritable, running around like headless chickens sometimes. We didn't put anything to it because we didn't know what was going on outside our little cubicle, if you like, you know. But it did change. I think the morale went downhill. People seem to be, I don't know what to say, they're just on edge.
At the time, I didn't know what had caused Paul's hypoglycemic attack, and it was clear to me that the hospital staff were struggling to find a reason for this sudden and unexpected change in Paul's health. On the Sunday following Paul's first attack, Paul had another attack. Our clearly deep concern and worry had now deepened, because in the space of 2 days, Paul had gone from a child that was going to be discharged from hospital having had treatment for a wheezy chest to someone who had had 2 subsequent and quite serious hypoglycemic attacks.
I was working a 1 till 9.
Right.
And we do the obs, 6 o'clock obs between 5 and 6, start doing them. And Paul was crying a lot in room, he was in room 5 then, really screaming. I asked Betty, she was my senior, if she would have a look at him, which she come down, we both stood there. And we looked at his feed charts and everything. It was cold and clammy and the sweat was off his forehead. All I can remember is his head was wet, because he didn't have much hair in him, it was wet through.
I'm Dawn Archer. I'm a Professor of Pragmatics and Corpus Linguistics, which means I'm a communication specialist at Manchester Metropolitan University.
Between 5:15, he was really crying. I didn't go in, I went in when he was crying, and I picked him up and he wouldn't stop crying. I shouted Betty, she come and have a look at him, and she did, and she says, let's get a feed down him. So we asked the student nurse to feed him. She attempted to, but he wouldn't take it. And we wondered, we kept sort of thinking, because it was quite pale and his breathing, he had like recession of his ribs, using his intercostal muscles a lot to breathe, which babies don't usually. And we decided to do this blood sugar. Me and Betty was stood in there, I pricked his finger, we stood there and we did his blood sugar, which was okay, normal.
This is Beverley Allit, a young woman in her 20s who's never been interviewed before by the police, having to give several interviews, one after the other. And in that sense, we can say that she's remarkably calm for her age, for the fact that she hadn't been interviewed before. This was someone, I think, who was good at telling stories. She even animates people as though they're characters when she's retelling what happened or didn't happen on a certain day on Ward 4.
Me and Betty was stood in there, I pricked his finger, we stood there and we did his blood sugar.
After the first interview tape, it was apparent that she was never going to admit anything.
That's right. And she spent her time distance herself from each incident, and also trying to name or put other people in the frame.
She did, and I think she used the fact that she medically knew more about things than what we did, and tried to confuse us with stuff that she came out with.
Well, she came over as a sort of a young woman, didn't she?
Which she was, she was only 22.
But she didn't come over as a vicious, malicious person. You've sat there and interviewed some of these tow rags from London, and were they actually vicious and malicious? The only difference with her is she was evil.
She was evil, yeah. But that wasn't apparent during the first couple of interviews, was it really? Not at all. No. In fact, I always remember the next morning, presumably it would be after the interview that we did, and my boss says, well, what's your honest feeling? And I said, I don't know. I don't know whether she's done it or not, because she was so convincing, wasn't she?
Absolutely.
Beverley Allit was certainly with Paul during that first hypoglycemic attack. But I don't actually remember being in the same room as Paul during those subsequent days. At the time of Paul's attacks, we were not able to gain information, so we were in the dark. So this is really quite worrying now. Paul has had 2 unexplained hypoglycemic attacks. Immediately after he was going to be released or discharged from hospital, something had happened. We didn't know why Paul was being ill, and it would appear at the time neither did the hospital. No one could give us any answers as to why he might be ill.
It was becoming apparent that we ought to concentrate our inquiry at that stage regarding and surrounding a little boy by the name of Paul Crampton, who was admitted to Ward 4 March, 20th of March. Beverley Allit certainly had been coming up as being present at a lot of these attacks, and certainly in relation to Paul Crampton. To be faced with this girl who's 22, pleasant, chatty, welcoming you into the house, quite happy for you to sit there and talk to her, to think that could she be the person responsible that had caused Paul Crampton's attack? The two didn't seem to marry up at that stage.
There was a lot of things went on in the ward that You know, we couldn't make hair and a tail off. We didn't know exactly what was going on, but we saw the crash cart going up and down once or twice. When the crash carts went out, they were sort of running to different cubicles, and obviously you got out of the way if you were in the middle of the room, or they would say to you, go back into your room. We knew something was wrong, because the staff all changing their attitudes very, very quickly. Everything went through the floor, as far as friendliness, professionalism, the whole lot. They're just panicking, just absolutely panicking.
When Paul had his third and final hypoglycemic attack, I was in the hospital at the time, and I returned to the ward, having been to the canteen for something to eat. When I returned to Paul's bedside, Paul was grey, clammy, and I recognised the symptoms immediately. Paul was clearly in some distress. He clearly needed medical attention at that stage. At which time they decided to transfer Paul to Queen's Medical Centre in an ambulance under a blue light. When I arrived at Queen's Medical Centre, Paul was in the intensive care unit. But the atmosphere was different to that at Grantham. It was calm. I felt confident, immediately confident. And of course, I don't mean that's any disrespect to the hard-working, dedicated staff at Grantham Hospital, but clearly things were out of their control. It was an Easter weekend, and Paul just got better. Very quickly was released from intensive care unit. Now, we were still concerned, of course, that there could be another attack, because we were still not getting explanations to why this had happened, why he'd had the attacks.
Initially, the inquiry revolved around Paul Crampton. And Professor Hull, who was the paediatrician at the Queen's Medical Centre, he was given all the files of about 15 children at that time, and he came back and said this one case, he didn't use the word murder, but this is unlawful. There was others that were very close, but he thought could possibly be sloppy nursing. And these children were ill. We've got to remember these children are ill, or they wouldn't be in hospital.
The boy did survive at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know. I heard.
He went to Queen's and he got better and he went home.
Well, it would get better if he was given something in Grantham, wouldn't he?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're talking about an assault that we don't want to happen again. That's what we're talking about.
Oh, I can understand it. There's too many ill babies as it is, without making them even iller.
I'm Paul Jones, retired police officer, Lincolnshire Police, the detective inspector in charge of the inquiry team. My role was to run the investigation team. So initially, we did have 13 different children's files to investigate. Because we had no knowledge of medical matters, we would first investigate purely one child, which was Paul Crampton. It was suspected that he'd had insulin injected into him illegally, and the investigation started off on that role. And we actually investigated Paul Crampton for the first 10 days. During that 10-day investigation, there was other things that appeared that we needed to investigate. We had to split it up between the various wards because we weren't happy that somebody had done anything wrong. It might have been a bug that was in there. Legionnaire's disease was suggested at one time. At that time also, we were then looking at families, family members that might have a grudge at the hospital.
I expected to be a suspect, and I expected the police to eliminate us fairly quickly. But we've all heard and seen on TV miscarriages of justice. So there are moments where I'm sure that gives a little shiver and a little concern that the police investigation might get it wrong.
We were looking at the nurses. Now that was difficult because these are all caregivers, lovely people who want to help people, and suddenly we're thinking there's somebody in their midst who might be doing harm. They were given their all, and they were working like most people, you know, a tremendous amount of work, putting in, caring for these children. And suddenly you've got these things happening that shouldn't be there. So they were upset, distressed, because they didn't understand what was happening. They probably didn't trust each other at some times, but for policemen to suddenly go up there to interrogate them about what they'd been doing made them feel guilty.
There was an incident room set up at Grantham Police Station where people were doing research into things like the attacks that had happened, when they'd happened, and creating a chart, basically, of the timings, the dates, what had happened to them, and more importantly, who had been present at the time of these attacks. It soon became apparent to the people in that incident room that one name kept coming up time after time after time.
Each morning, the whole team would be there 9 o'clock in the morning, and the inspector in charge of the control room came through one day with his chart. And it had a line of all the nurses down one side, it had a line of all the children on the other side, and each incident, we weren't really calling them attacks at that stage, but of each incident, so that was 23 on one line, and something like, I think, about 16 or 17 nurses down one side. And it was very evident that the line was complete on Beverley Allit's column. She was the only one that was present for all the incidents.
Well, it's certainly in the early days of the investigation, there was no indicator about who may be responsible. As soon as we began to look at individual cases and began to see that there was a common factor, then clearly the finger of suspicion began to come towards Beverley Allit.
There were a number of unexplained child illnesses. Sudden and unexplained collapses, I think, was a term that was used a lot at the time, Paul only being one of them. We were quite clear that something had happened in Grantham Hospital. If we go back to the first hypoglycemic attack in Grantham Hospital, and what I recall as the words of Beverley Allit saying, you know, this child is hypo, which I later came to understand meant hypoglycemic, she gave the rest of the medical staff the diagnosis. The medical staff administered glucose, and as a result, he recovered very quickly. So who knows how significant Allit's diagnosis was, but he did get administered glucose and recovered quite quickly.
It wasn't too difficult, actually, to detect the crime. Within a very few days, it was established the only person who could possibly be guilty of this was Beverley Allit.
When I first saw her, she was a young nurse. She didn't show any emotion as such. She was quite chatty. I think at that time she was very brave because there was a lot of people on the ward. She didn't realise that she had been highlighted and it was only her that could do it.
I'll start off the interview with you, Beverley, and have you been aware of the investigations that's been going on with regard to that?
Yes.
And have you been seen before?
Yes.
And what were the circumstances of those interviews?
There was taking place, one was on the ward and one at my home. Just witness statements I made.
Our initial interviews with Beverley, We were on a bit of a fishing expedition. We had good evidence. We had good evidence to say that she had murdered or attacked these children, particularly with poor Crampton, with the volume that she was there for all of them. We had good evidence for that, but we didn't have the individual evidence.
We suddenly had a situation where we thought a nurse was responsible. As a result of that, remember that this nurse had been not only a colleague and friend of the other nurses, but also a friend of the families of these children. She had been doing a one-to-one with some of these, and I think as on one child, she was actually asked to be the godparent at a christening.
I don't remember when I first met Beverley Allit, but I know she was around the hospital at the time Paul was admitted and during his stay there. I do remember talking to her in a corridor when I'd walked to and from the canteen.
You then visited Paul in his room?
Yeah.
He was asleep?
Was he? Oh, I don't know. I know Dad came. And Mum went. They did a changeover.
He thought, everything's quiet, it's all right, we'll leave Mum, she can go about her business. He popped upstairs to the canteen.
So on the 24th of March, the police were trying to establish my whereabouts to eliminate me from their inquiries. I was at Grantham Police Station with a member of the police going through the Grantham Hospital canteen till roll, because I knew that on Thursday the 28th, the day of Paul's final hypoglycemic attack, I knew I'd been and had a meal in the hospital canteen. I knew what I'd eaten and drunk at the time, so that could be seen. But the till roll, or the clock on the till, was 13 hours inaccurate. So it was the police were trying to correct the time on the till roll and match it up to what I'd eaten to put me in that canteen at a particular time.
I remember seeing that you were about, in and out. Recognised you as one of the staff we'd seen there before, and you went up to the canteen. I can't remember seeing you up on the canteen.
What time did he come down?
About...
Did he stay up there?
just after 1.
He came down after 1?
Just after 1.
But I was definitely up at lunch.
About 1:15.
This is saying their report's normal, right? They were still doing report when I came back. That's how I recognised my time.
The point I'm making, Bev, is that Paul, we can tie down as best we can.
Yeah.
It was unattended between the parameters of 1:45 and 1 o'clock.
Right.
We can also assume that we know that people were turning up for duty for the briefing at 1 o'clock or just a few minutes before. So there's a 10-minute period there between 1:45 and 1:55 when Paul was unattended, and somebody would have had the opportunity to introduce something to his body. And what I'm saying is, you're the person that had the opportunity, because you would be on your lunch break if you went for it. You could have said you was going for lunch and didn't.
When I got back from having the meal, he had started to have a hypoglycemic attack, and I called for medical attention. So I guess it gave a narrower window of time for the police to both eliminate me and establish who else was in the hospital and could have administered Paul insulin at the time I was in the canteen.
You could have gone into
I'm
his
really
room.
going to go into his room and say, oh, here you are, have some of this.
I don't know.
No way. No way. I think it's a load of crap. I wouldn't do that. When I go to lunch to get off the ward for 5 minutes, have a break, have a cup of tea. A glass of orange juice, anything. Sometimes I don't even eat. Sometimes I have a sandwich, a hot meal, depends on what I fancy.
We have to accept what the medical experts tell us, or I certainly do anyway.
Allit was unremarkable in every way. She was just a member of the staff. When I spoke to her, she was pleasant, but she didn't stand out in any way, good or bad. She was just someone in the hospital. She was clearly quite junior, and so I spent more time talking to people that were more senior about Paul's condition following his first attack.
I was being told frequently that poor Crampton had probably got pancreatitis or a pancreatic disease that was creating more insulin, or it was a naturally occurring insulin. And the general medics did not come up with any explanation that we could show that this had been unlawfully injected. Professor Marks was an expert on insulin, and he was world-renowned expert on insulin.
I'm Vincent Marks. I'm an emeritus professor of clinical biochemistry at the University of Surrey. At that time, I was a practicing professor of clinical biochemistry and a consultant in chemical pathology and metabolic medicine. I was in Glasgow in, I think it must have been 1991, at a conference, and I was called to the telephone by somebody saying it was the police who wanted to speak to me. I was full of anxiety because I thought it must be that one of my children had been involved in an accident or my wife had fallen down or something had happened. I answered the phone. It turned out to be a superintendent of police in Grantham who told me that he was investigating a suspected case of murder with insulin. I arranged to meet a week later. I then learned about the strange goings-on in Grantham Hospital, where there had been a very large number of babies who had become mysteriously ill, several of whom had died. And one of them, particularly, he was a child who had suffered from hypoglycemia of no very clear origin. Couldn't understand why he had become hypoglycemic. I said, well, we'll look into it. I then arranged with police in Grantham to receive samples of blood that had been collected before the child had gone to Nottingham. Insulin is made in the body naturally, and it circulates in the blood as a natural substance. In our bodies, insulin is always released into the bloodstream from the pancreas where it's made with another sister hormone called C-peptide or connecting peptide. If you measure the C-peptide in blood, it's always present in a higher concentration than in insulin because it disappears from the blood more slowly than insulin. So although they both go into the blood at the same rate, insulin disappears rather faster. If you find insulin but no C-peptide, the main, not the absolute only cause of a high insulin and a low C-peptide is that somebody has given the patient insulin out of a bottle.
Nobody told us about C-peptide until we met Professor Marks, and he immediately had the answer that could show that this insulin had been injected in poor Crampton.
The result was the highest insulin result I'd ever seen. There was no C-peptide present, so we knew that somebody was giving this child huge doses of insulin. So the C-peptide disappears, but there's still insulin in the blood. And that's how we know it's malicious.
The police are in no doubt the insulin was administered deliberately. The amount of insulin in Paul's blood on the 28th of March, 500 plus units, would have proved fatal if it had not been on a glucose drip.
The Paul Crampton case really established that mischief was being done. Fortunately, he recovered completely and fully in every way.
You know when I looked after Paul. I'm not trying to cover up that, it's in here. I don't care what anyone...
Others, isn't there? We're looking at all these others, all these incidents on Ward Fee, which was grossly over the national average.
I was never in any doubt that it was her.
That knew was I.
Well, and from day one, we knew it was her because she was the only one that had the opportunity.
And prior to her going there, nothing had ever happened.
That's
nothing
right.
untoward. And as soon as she left the premises, nothing happened again, did it?
As soon as they went to the Queen's, they recovered and nothing happened.
Exactly.
But I remember that when we came in, you'd been looking at the ward for about a fortnight, hadn't you?
Yeah, because I mean, at that stage we didn't know, did we?
No, not a clue. And then, of course, once they got that Paul Crampton result, that's what highlighted it really, and they decided to turn it into a crime.
Yeah, yeah, because we've got the proof then, haven't we?
Do you know what causes hypoglycemia?
Diabetes.
Well, apart from that.
No, I'm not very well up on the diabetic stuff anyway. No. All I know that if it was given insulin, that would make his sugar go down, because it would do that anyway.
How do you know that?
Because diabetics are given insulin to reduce their sugar, like so they can have a meal without going hyperglycemic.
So a hypo attacker, you're saying to me, could be called by somebody being given insulin?
If he's not diabetic and able to cope with the situation, yeah.
Right, so we get the doctor there and he has various treatments, is that right?
Yeah, he's taken to the treatment room and he was nursed on a resuscitator.
And he was given a drip, I think.
He put a drip in his head.
From then on, I suggested that we look at other blood samples or from other children that might have been harmed. If they were still in their refrigerators at the hospital, we would analyse them and see if there were found any other cases. We found one case, one of the identical twins that Beverley Allit was accused of harming, who had died, the one called Becky. The insulin level was, again, very, very high. Not as high as in Paul Crampton, but nevertheless very high. But she had died. She had also had a very high potassium level, so she may have died from potassium poisoning rather than insulin poisoning, but she had both.
We've got evidence on Paul Crampton, which was definitely there. We've got a little bit on Becky Phillips, because she had insulin as well. We didn't even know about Claire Peck or Liam Taylor, although he was put down as a heart attack, which couldn't happen in a baby. We assumed that she'd admit it fairly soon because of the weight of evidence.
Well, I think, to be fair, the officer in charge was under a bit of pressure, wasn't he? Because he was concerned that if we didn't do anything and take any sort of positive action, that
he didn't really want to have her interviewed early. It was Paul himself that put pressure on him to do it. Well, not pressure, but, you know, our point of view was, look, we've got this weight of evidence, we really ought to be doing it sooner or later, because otherwise what happens to somebody else?
My son had been in there, I don't know, 2 days, 3 days, and he was getting better. He was getting a lot better, to the extent that the doctor came out and took out whatever it was in his hand or in his arm or wherever it was, I don't know. And he was off the medication, the strong medication. And so the missus, being a smoker, decided to have a cigarette. But before she went, saw the nurse in the playroom and said, "Can you bring him in?" Whichever nurse it was said, "Yes, I'll look after him." She went and had a cigarette. As she was about to light the cigarette, there was a terrible feeling of foreboding. She decided to come back and see if my son was okay. So anyway, she ran back to the nurse, and my son wasn't in the playroom. She couldn't figure out what had gone wrong, and she spoke to the nurse that was in charge, and the nurse said that he'd been taken back to his cubicle. And so my wife ran round to our cubicle, and there she was, changing and putting back some sort of medication that that should have been finished. My wife pulled her, said, "No, she doesn't need. He doesn't need any more medication. Take that out, and we'll call the doctor and see what he has to say." And as she said, "I'm going to call the doctor and see what he has to say," the nurse stamped on the floor, threw something down on the cover of the bed. And that was it. I never saw her again, this nurse, and that was Beverley Allit.
I'm really going to give a harmful drug to a tiny little helpless baby.
Could you give me your full name, please?
Beverley Gail Allit.
Your date of birth, please?
4th of the 10th, 1968.
The hospital were concerned about the number of incidents that had been occurring on Ward 4.
It makes it hard to accept that a baby comes in and they die. It upsets me.
She was perfectly normal growing up.
She's got multiple victims, multiple opportunities all around her.
Insulin, suffocating potassium, lignocaine.
I still can't quite come to terms with it at times.
I'm being confronted by a murderer.
I just can't get it through to nobody. I am not bloody lying. I wouldn't do it. Everybody on that ward knows how much my nursing means to me.
We're now coming up to the old Grantham police station, and it occupied the whole of this area, and this is where Beverley would have been brought into the police station, into the cells where we are now. Beverley Allit, I think I can't say anything other than that she was such an evil, vicious person. She attacked vulnerable, defenceless children who she was supposed to be caring for. She not only attacked them, she murdered 4 of them. And there's nothing to say other than that she was just this evil, evil person.
Beverley Allit was a student enrolled nurse that was working on Ward 4 at the time at Grantham Hospital. We now know that she killed 4 children on that ward and attacked 9 others, using various things like introducing insulin to the body, suffocating others, injecting potassium into others, lignocaine. There was a variety of things that she actually introduced to these children.
The date is Tuesday, the 21st of May, 1991, and we are in an interview room at Grantham Police Station. Could you give me your full name, please?
Beverley Gail Allit.
Your date of birth, my love?
04/10/1968.
On the 21st of May, we had a meeting at Grantham Police Station, and it was decided who would go to the house, who would do the arrest. We covered the grounds for the arrest and what she was going to be arrested for.
I was involved with the arrest when we decided that we ought to bring her in. I'd spent about 3 or 4 days sitting down, going through all the medical files, trying to put together what evidence we had. And our evidence was very slim at that stage. Other than evidence of Paul Crampton, that he had been injected with insulin, We had evidence that Beverley had been present for each time one of these children had a relapse. We didn't have the evidence of what these children were dying of, but we did have this overall view of 13 children that all suffered from one or more attacks over that 8-week period.
We went to Beverley Allit's house and she was arrested for theft of a key from the hospital and for the attempted murder of Paul Crampton.
This interview is being recorded. I am Detective Sergeant Smith, stationed at Grantham Police Station. My colleague present is
Neil Jones, Detective Inspector.
Okay. Before we say anything else to you, though, I must tell you, you do not have to say anything unless you wish to do so, but what you say may be given in evidence. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Timing of this malpractice, for want of a better term, whether it be accidental or otherwise, when the insulin was administered to Paul. And it has to be given to him, as far as we can understand, at some time
Yeah.
when you were looking after him.
It has to be within that period, in that morning, doesn't it?
Mm. And you were, if you like, the person responsible for it, if you want to put it that way.
But the thing is, I didn't have access to no drugs.
But it's very easily said, is that, isn't it? I mean,
No,
we've gone through that this morning already, where you do have access
I do
to
it,
drugs.
yeah, not on that ward.
My name's Dr. Jane Monckton-Smith. I'm a forensic criminologist and I work at the University of Gloucestershire. It was one of the highest profile cases where a woman was accused of such awful crimes, but a nurse as well. We're talking about somebody who has been gifted to look after vulnerable and sick children who absolutely cannot be trusted. And it's chilling because those children have no way at all of defending themselves. And the parents are so dependent on people to be able to save their children.
I don't think I've actually been into Grantham for many years. And obviously this was the home of Margaret Thatcher. And described as the most boring town in the country. I vividly remember coming here to go down through those corridors, picking up samples, seeing the crash units. There was an apprehension on the ward when we came, obviously, and we got a little bit of resentment. It wasn't directed at the police personally, but it was because of the circumstances. Everybody felt they were probably under suspicion, and that wasn't very easy for anybody. It wasn't comfortable coming in here until after we arrested Beverley Allit.
I'll start off the interview with you, Beverley, and then as we go along, Sergeant Smith will bring in some details. You were arrested this morning, in the first instance, on suspicion of the theft of a key from the hospital. And I shall deal with that. And secondly, on the attempt murder of Paul Crampton, who was a baby on the ward from about the 20th of March. Do you remember that child being on the ward?
Yes, I do.
When you walk into an interview room, somebody's been arrested. They're under some stress to start with. They're slightly, one, apprehensive, but also very often quite aggressive. When I entered the room, she looked very small. She didn't look down, she wasn't intimidated. She looked at us, said hello, and yet I knew that in her presence, poor Crampton had been given a massive overdose of insulin. And if he hadn't been treated right, he would have died.
We'll go into the business with a key to start with. On the 14th of February of this year, the keys belonging to the dangerous drugs cabinet went missing.
Dangerous?
Drugs fridge.
Yeah, the fridge key.
Well, the key ring actually holds the dangerous drugs cabinet key, the fridge key, and about 15 keys.
Yeah, the whole
And the whole bunch went missing. No?
No, I can remember a fridge key going missing.
You can remember that there's certain drugs which are kept in a fridge on the ward, aren't they?
Yeah.
Obviously, they've got to be kept cool for purposes.
Yes.
Yeah. It's that key we're talking about.
The fridge key.
That's right.
The one key.
The one key.
Yes, I know.
I just didn't get the reaction at all that I expected. She wasn't evasive, she wasn't aggressive. She initially answered the questions that we asked her, but she always had an explanation.
You tell me then originally what you know about the loss of that single key from the fridge. But if you'd explain first of all, so we're all aware where that key is normally kept and what ring it's on and what it's with.
Right. The key is usually kept on with a bunch of keys, a large bunch of keys containing different keys for the drugs trolley. There's the fridge key. I don't know what the other keys are for on it. I've never had to use them.
One of the topics that's very important in the first interview is the set of keys, the bunch of keys, as the police officers refer to them. In fact, the first bit of their interaction is very much about them trying to establish, is it a bunch of keys that went missing or is it one key? Is it the fridge key?
Now, what can you tell me tonight about that missing key?
The same that I could tell you this afternoon.
Which is different, isn't it, to what you said to me last Wednesday afternoon?
I spoke to Margaret Geeson about this yesterday, and I told them, and this morning, Margaret was asking me, saying, could I remember her giving me the keys? And when she put it all together, I could.
I think given how long the interviews went on for and how cooperative she was prepared to be, I think possibly Beverley Allit got something from the intention she was given at that point. This was someone who engaged for hours and hours and hours with the police, and at some point was answering the same questions. The key's a key, if you like. We need to know about them, and they need to know how much Allit knows about them. It provides Allit with access to, for example, insulin from the fridge, and it's one of the most key topics that will go throughout the whole set of interviews.
I've never ever seen that key since it went missing. If it was took off that key ring by anybody, I haven't seen it. If somebody's got it, it's not me, and I've never touched it.
Having seen Beverley Allit for the 2 occasions prior to arrest, then being present when she was arrested and conveying her back to the police station, she was still coming across as this naive girl, really, and we were struggling to, or I was struggling to think, you know, could she be responsible for this? A lot of us, and I certainly know that the officer in charge was hoping and naively thinking that a 22-year-old girl that had never been in trouble with the police before was maybe going to admit to all the things that she'd done. last week, which was the 14th of May, at the end of the statement, I asked you if you could remember anything about the missing key. And there's an entry in the statement that says you vaguely remember the keys being lost and that a new lock had to be fitted. Would you agree that that's what you said?
That's what I said to you, yeah.
Right, and yet today, when the key's mentioned, you say that you now remember that you reported it to Nurse Geeson.
No, Margaret Geeson yesterday was talking about the keys, the drug keys, and she says to me, "Oh, can you remember when it went missing?" And she was telling me about it. And I said, "Oh," and I just said, we just sat talking about it for half an hour, and she said, "I don't know how it could have fell off." And then I can remember, she asked me to get something from the fridge, because I couldn't even remember that. She said, "Yeah, it was eye drops." She was sort of telling me what I went to get. And she handed me the keys, and I got to the nurse's station, went to take the key, and it wasn't there.
What's so apparent to me is that on the 14th, a week before this interview, she's vaguely aware of a key going missing. A week later, she can now remember in detail that she walks to the fridge. She says, "Oh, Margaret, the key's not on here." I mean, she's remembering it in too much detail, isn't she? It's rubbish, isn't it, really? It comes across as absolute rubbish.
We're searching your house at the moment, aren't we? And we're looking in your locker.
Yeah.
And we're going to look in your car.
Yeah.
How are we going to find that key?
No, nowhere. I haven't got it.
What we get at this point is something that's potentially damaging because it's a direct, almost accusatory question. It's not asking why have you removed the key, so we're not there yet, but we are saying something that Allit needs to answer carefully. And what we get is multiple negation. She doesn't just say no, she uses "I never" 3 times. So I never went to the fridge, I've never. We also see evidence of stress at that point because her pitch rises.
Have you had any reason to remove that key?
I never went to the fridge. I've never.
Now our pitch will rise because of tension in the voice, so it automatically happens that our pitch goes up. And so what this shows me is that she's at pains to point out that she's had no reason to take the key off the bunch of keys, but she's showing tension. And there's one little bit I want to draw your attention to within quite a lot of things that are interesting for us. How she says, "went to get the fridge key off."
And how far did you get before you realised that key was missing?
Not very far.
You didn't actually get to the fridge?
No, I went to take it off, because I had a whole bunch of men sort of walking up, and I went to take the key off, pick it off, and it wasn't there. And I went through them all.
Was you going to remove that key from the bunch of keys?
Now, if we're using a bunch of keys, we go to find the key. We go to locate the key within the bunch. We don't try and take it off. And so there's something about that language use that points out went to get the fridge key off. What we can also notice is what we call eye omission. At this point, she's struggling and she's leaking. This is a difficult topic for her to talk about, and therefore we see evidence of her actually giving a little bit too much away, and maybe she did take a key off. And that's why that language is sneaking through.
My name is Jeremy Marshall Roberts. I live here in Corby Glen. Beverley's parents worked for me for many years. Beverley used to come and take children out for walks in the afternoon with the pram and the buggy and the dog, not just ours, but other friends who are still here. And again, she and a friend used to come babysitting on a regular basis all around the village. And everybody knew, and it was never a problem. She was perfectly normal growing up, you know, doing all jobs. Fairly happy-go-lucky on the whole, sometimes a bit moody like many teenagers. As a teenager, she was hoping to get enough qualifications to go and become a trainee nurse. And we all wished her well, as you would do, you know, jolly good, going to be a nurse. I'm just sorry that Beverley never managed to achieve that and went the other way.
You want to be a staff nurse on Child's Ward, don't you?
Or special care, something do with children, yeah.
And yet, you're saying in another breath that that's the difficult side of the job for you.
I've only just qualified. Yeah, I've never seen it before in a child. Never. Up until being on that ward, I'd never, ever. I'd nursed children, yeah, when I was on there as a pupil, and I really enjoyed it. And I've like been a nanny. I've looked after kids since I was about 14, 15, and I've really enjoyed it. So I've decided that's what I want to do. It's just that you don't expect them to just go like that.
She had a perfectly normal upbringing, yeah. I still can't quite come to terms with it at times. But yeah, we're obviously wrong.
She didn't have the kind of background that we often associate with serial killers. She was brought up in a fairly nice family, a normal village where she was living. And nothing untoward seemed to have happened to her. When we look back at the life of a serial killer, we want to see what was the event, what was the thing that happened that turned them into a serial killer. But it's so much more complex than that. And sometimes in an ordinary family, there will be this anomaly, this person who does not think like them, who does not respond like them, who doesn't care, who doesn't feel, who's got no empathy. And that's, in some cases, just the luck of the draw.
The sense that you get from listening to the 16 interviews, especially the first few interviews, is that the police officers were assuming that this was an inexperienced witness coming in to talk about very, very serious charges.
If you can do it and lie about it and get away with it, then you're not throwing anything away, are you?
Nothing, not a thing. Oh, right. It's worth too much.
But we're just supposed to accept that when I say other things are pointing differently.
You accept what you want.
Well, yes, we have to, don't we?
Yeah.
We do.
No matter what you say, I've got to live with it, haven't I?
She wasn't necessarily answering the questions that they needed answering. They would have to work a lot harder to therefore get the information they needed to either disregard her as a suspect or begin to understand what exactly Allit had been doing to these children.
We thought, you know, young nurse, 13 children, all had some sort of relapse. 4 of them had died. It didn't go be long before she realises what's happening, and she will want to mitigate. And we gave her the opportunity. She needed to mitigate, say it was an accident, she didn't really intend what happened, but she never, ever, ever came over to admit it.
We came here in 1974, and there are about 400 residents. Right now in 2020, there are some 1,400. So, you know, things have changed. You know, progress, some good, some bad. But most people now really, unless they can actually remember seeing it in the papers and it affected them anyway, have got no real knowledge about Beverley or the Angel of Death as she became known at that particular point.
Whilst my colleague just checks a statement, how long have you been nursing?
2 years. Well, training.
Yeah, since you sort of signed on as to be a
I
nurse.
started in September '88.
You did? Are you a local girl then?
Yeah.
Being born where?
Corby Glen.
You're from Corby, yeah. Is that where your parents live now?
Yeah.
Do you visit your parents?
Very rare.
When she was babysitting, we never had any problems. It's just occasionally, like many people, when she was a teenager, certainly, yeah. She had the odd time she had a bandage or plaster or something. But, you know, it's easy enough to do. But nothing to suggest what we now know, if that makes sense.
She fell off a bike and cut her leg. She fell on glass. She catheterised herself later on. She injected water into one of her breasts so that it was bigger than the other. She took hot water into her mouth before they took her temperature. She was doing all sorts of strange things. And from a very, very early age, I think 6, 7, 8, she was feigning illnesses, coming up with all sorts of strange things.
She had a history of hurting herself. That was a sign, definitely, that there was something wrong with her. Feigning illness can get you an awful lot of attention, but it also takes a lot of pressure off you to be or do anything. You know, what we see when she was studying, she would be off sick more than she was there. Well, that takes the pressure off her to pass her exams. That takes the pressure off her to prove her brilliance. And that was a behaviour she definitely learned when she was a child. There was less expectation of Beverley when she was poorly and more attention.
She'd present herself at surgeries with illnesses she didn't have. She'd go to hospitals for illnesses she didn't have. And so she actually groomed herself, and I think that she was very, very good at coming over as being honest. She'd lived a life for many years. She'd been used to being interrogated.
I'm just like any other nurse, I don't know. My first instinct, I know what to do. It's just that my first instinct is bloody hell, that sort of thing.
You're a bit of a panicker.
I do panic, yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
When you're caring for little ones?
Yeah, if they're ill, I'd rather have somebody else do it, not me.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but surely as a nurse, the whole idea of having a nurse and a trained nurse is you can do... Well, yes, that's right, exactly. I mean, parents are absolute known panickers in relation to children, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a cough or a wheeze in a baby, it's the worst thing ever happened. But I mean, normally, nurses don't take too much notice of things like that and can deal because they're more used to it.
I can deal with it, but I think it's the fact that after starting on that, I've had nothing. There's always been something. And you don't go to children's ward to expect that sort of thing. You go on it, you think a children's ward really nice, you look after your kids, you see them get better. You don't think of them that they can, like, it makes it hard to accept that a baby comes in and they die. It does for me, it upsets me.
I think Beverley Allit had quite a severe personality disorder, and the kind of personality disorder we're talking about, antisocial personality disorder, so she's probably got a lot of psychopathic traits. And one of the things more broadly that we can observe in such people is that they're not intuitive, they're not very good at interpreting other people's emotions or what other people are thinking. So what tends to happen, to be able to manipulate life to go their way and for them to get things that they want, they learn scripts. So everything that they say, they're drawing from a script.
There's just two things that I'd like to cover with you, Bev, before we finish. On the day that Paul Crampton was transferred to Nottingham, we know that you accompanied him. Who requested that you went? She was the one that asked you to go.
She said to me, would you mind going?
As we understood from members of the staff today that you'd actually volunteered to go, you wanted to go as opposed to being asked.
No, I didn't want to go. I wouldn't have gone because he was so ill before we went. I wouldn't have volunteered to go with him. Because what happened at Nottingham, I wish I wasn't there for that.
But you didn't know that was going to happen?
No, I didn't.
In the interviews, you can see her sticking to a script. I think her calmness is partly her personality, but it's also part of a script of, I'm not guilty, why should I be distressed?
But if you were the person that had caused him to be ill, you would realise that there would be no problem in the ambulance on the way.
He turned ill when we got to Nottingham. It got worse when we got into Nottingham. We got him on the bed and he went off again. And Mum was getting really uptight about it because no nurse came to us, you see. There was just me and Dr. Taylor left in the room with his ambulance man and Paul.
I think people underestimated Beverley Allit, definitely. Me included. It is so apparent on reflection, reading through things and, you know, talking to other people as a result of what she'd said, how clever she was, really. And how, well, ruthless she was in killing these children and attacking others. But she was very crafty at blaming others and doing something very, very crafty and very good at trying to take it away from her. I honestly think that she liked to be in the centre of attention with it all as well. And I think that something in her mind needed that sort of attention to make her function properly. And in the early days of the interviews, I get the distinct impression that she was actually enjoying sitting there and being interviewed and being the centre of what was happening.
So I'm going to carry insulin in my pocket and go and get a needle and syringe.
Well, if you want to tell me what's happened, do so.
Is that what I'm going to do? I said, am I going to carry insulin around with me?
You tell me. Somebody has done.
I have enough in my pockets as it is.
Somebody has done.
Maybe they have, not me. I think too much of my career and everything to do that.
Only
no
if
way.
you're caught. I might hasten
Yeah,
to add.
only if you're caught. That's a big word, only, isn't it?
This interview is being recorded. I'm Detective Sergeant 517 Reeve, that's R-E-E-V-E.
For the first set of interviews on the 21st of May, there's a level of cooperation and there's a level of rapport between the police officers and Beverley Allit.
The date is still Tuesday, the 21st of May, 1991. The time is 10:30. The time is 12:30. 1:15. 3:45 p.m. 4:32 p.m.
The date is Tuesday the 21st of May 1991 and the time, according to the clock in the interview room, is 20:50.
We have to appreciate that it's very difficult to interview someone again and again and again on the same day. And I think that partly feeds into why Beverley Allit and the police officers have more of a strained relationship towards the evening. There's a change of police officers. And we go from Beverley Allit having established a rapport with some police officers throughout the day and having quite a good rapport with them to being introduced to one particular police officer called Reeve.
I appreciate you've been interviewed probably at length today, haven't you?
Yeah.
By some of my colleagues, and they've had an early start, the same as you have, and they've subsequently gone off duty. So my colleague and I want to interview you again and go over 1 or 2 points that are relevant.
Yeah.
We start looking at all these incidents and looking for a common denominator, i.e. somebody who's on duty. Appreciate I might be repeating myself, but for the benefit of this interview I intend doing. We look at who's been on duty and had access, opportunity.
Yeah, but I've been
And it's you,
on duty.
it's you.
What am I doing? What am I doing? Going round flipping, doing something to them all?
Probably.
What? You tell me what I could do.
Reeve is brought in to do this interview. You already sense that Beverley Allit is obviously quite tired, but that her response to that, even beyond the tiredness, is to become quite antagonistic with Reeve in particular.
As things got out of hand.
I don't know.
Have you administered too much?
She shows her irritation in her voice. She is much more defensive and she's attacking back while defending herself by throwing all these questions. But Reeve remains the same throughout. And so this is now about working with someone to see potentially if they can press buttons. And we have to remember as well that she's tired at this point. She's gone through several interviews. It's late into the day. She's been cooperative or mainly cooperative up till this point. And so this would have been a potential shock for her that suddenly the interviews are being conducted differently.
When you're interviewing somebody like Beverley Allit, you're never going to win an argument. You need to let themselves trip themselves up. The police really did that rather well, I think. They just kept on and on and on, and they stayed calm, and there was no emotion, and it was just going over and over things.
I try not to do anything wrong.
Well, the point is, That child's been given an overdose of insulin.
Yeah.
At a time when you're looking after him.
Yeah. Not only me looking after him, though.
Well, let's put it this way. On that particular day, you were allocated to look after that.
Along with Kathy.
Well, don't push it onto a
I'm not pushing
nurse.
it onto Kathy. No way. I think
You were the
Kathy
senior
should.
nurse in charge of that child that day.
As she started to reveal herself accidentally, that gave them opportunities to pick up on that. And I think she really started to lose confidence when she realised that some of her vulnerabilities were being picked up by the police, and that's what really got her.
As this inquiry goes on, you know, the opinion that myself and some of the colleagues have reached is that there's one person who's got reason to tell lies, and it's yourself. Hence, you're here in custody being interviewed.
But I just can't get it through to nobody. I am not bloody lying. I wouldn't do it.
On the 21st of May, I'm told at that time that a young lady is being questioned at Grantham Police Station, and that turns out to be a nurse called Beverley Allit. I clearly remember that person from Grantham Hospital. It was a shock that children, or maybe a number of children, could have been attacked by someone who was employed to look after them, someone who was in a caring profession, whose job it was to take care of people that were ill.
I think it's really important as well to remember the position that the families were in. They were in one of the most distressing times of their lives. They were with a sick child. They had no power to make that child better. They're totally reliant on other people. They would have seen Beverley Allit somewhat through that lens. This is somebody who's going to help us. They wouldn't have dreamt that she was going to hurt their child. They'd have been grateful for the attention she was giving that child, and in some ways that makes it a lot easier to manipulate.
Do you get involved with your patients?
I talk to them, I socialise.
No, that wasn't what I was meaning. I mean, I would expect you to talk to
There's one, and I'm a godmother to her.
Who's that?
Phillips, Katie.
How did that come about?
She was on the ward. They were twins. They'd been on and off the ward a lot. And Becky actually had a cot death. Katie came in for observations because she was rolling her eyes as something. We was actually having to special because parents were that upset that had lost one, and we needed to be a nurse there all the time. And Katie I was feeding her, and I went to take the bottle out of her mouth, and she looked navy blue. So I shouted Margaret, who was at the station, and she come and she just gave her oxygen, and she just kept doing that, going blue. And at one time she went so blue, doctor said her heart stopped beating, and she got took to City Hospital and was ventilated. She was quite poorly.
Katie Phillips, who was the sister of Becky, who Allit's already murdered. She's given her insulin and she's died at home. This child is brought onto the ward just for observations, and yet here she is, and she's godmother to this child. She has no remorse. She must be absolutely evil, really. She's killed the sister. She's then reiterating what's happened to this child. She then starts to call it Phillips instead of Katie, because obviously I think she suddenly realised the position she's in and what she's actually done. We didn't know at this time, but we did know eventually that she squeezed this child and broke her ribs. And yet she's talking about it going floppy. And this is her own godchild. This is the child she's looking after. The parents think that she is a saint.
When I was told cot death with Becky, I could accept that fact. But when Katie was taken ill, it was like a nightmare. I just couldn't understand what I'd done so wrong.
could see my world falling apart around me and just couldn't do anything about it. I just felt totally hopeless and helpless.
She's hurting children, but she's actually hurting their parents twice as much. I think that it's the adults that she's actually trying to hurt. The children are disposable, they're collateral damage. She doesn't get as much from hurting the children as hurting their parents. For Beverley Allit, the aftermath is as much a part of the event as the actual assaults. She's still that person with power. And one of the things that gives her power is that she's not affected emotionally by any of it. But the people who are affected emotionally are crumbling in front of her eyes, and she's this tower of strength.
Children suffered a total of 24 medically unexpected cardiorespiratory attacks, resulting in 4 deaths, for which we believe you are responsible. I have here a list of all children concerned. Liam James Taylor, Timothy Hardwick, Kaylee Desmond, Paul Crampton, Bradley Gibson, Yik Hung Chan, Becky Phillips, Katie Phillips, Christopher Peasgood, Christopher King, Patrick Elston and Claire Louise Peck.
You can go through these children. Liam Taylor, Timothy Hardwick, Becky Phillips, Claire Peck had all died.
And what happened with that then?
He was ill, very ill baby. He had very severe bronchiolitis, pneumonia sort of thing. Well, there was an auxiliary, I was talking to, she was talking to me, and we sort of stood talking, and I went to do his obs, and he looked like he had blotches on his skin. And so I asked the charge nurse to have a look at him, and David came and says, "Can you get a doctor?" And while David was in, I was phoning the doctor, he shouted cardiac arrest while I was at the nurse's station, and so I put a call out for that instead.
What had happened to him to make him have the cardiac arrest?
I don't know.
And nor does anybody else?
It was all I know that he was very ill.
Timothy Hardwick, the suggestion is that she actually suffocated him. And there he was, a defenceless boy, and she killed him.
That was the cerebral palsy little boy. I don't know, he was quite old, about 10, 11, I don't know for sure.
What happened to him?
He had a fit and was like frothing from the mouth. I was stood at the nurse station, I could hear him coughing, and I thought, oh, God, what's he doing? And with him being, he couldn't do anything for himself, I thought I'd better prop him up, and I shouted Mary to come and help me, and he died on the ward.
Claire was what they call a happy wheezer. She was smiling and giggling. She was a real happy little child.
She came in acute asthma attack, and she didn't get better from no matter what they gave her.
Did she die?
Yeah, she didn't pick up. She just came in really ill, and we all tried our best, nothing happened.
And so you would not have had any opportunity to do anything
Well, she
underwater
came in ill,
child?
and she remained ill all the time.
Is that confirmed with
She
the
never
notes?
picked up.
Claire Peck had potassium injected into her system. We had 4 children who all died at her hands. Becky and Paul Crampton had insulin. Others were deprived of oxygen. There was some left disabled, you see. Kaylee Desmond and Katie were left disabled.
You've been arrested on suspicion this morning of the murder of Becky Phillips. I'm now arresting you for the murder of Liam James Taylor.
The murder of Timothy William Hardwick, the attempted murder of Kaylee Joanne Desmond.
For the attempted murder of Paul Crampton.
For the attempt murder of Bradley John Gibson.
For the attempt murder of Yik Hung Chow.
The attempt murder of Katie Sue Phillips.
For the attempted murder of Christopher Peasgood.
The attempt murder of Christopher John King at Grantham.
For the attempted murder of Patrick Robert Elston.
The attempt murder of Michael Davidson. The murder of Claire Louise Peck.
Why did you attempt to murder or murder some of these children?
No reply.
Could you give me your full name, please?
Beverley Gale Allit.
Your date of birth, please?
4th of the 10th, 1968.
The Beverley Allit case is one hell of a story.
What should have been a place of safety became a killing field.
You're smiling. Is it funny? Is it light-hearted? Don't you take the interview serious?
There was something not quite right about Beverley Allit.
Jonesy, you're chasing rainbows.
But we're just supposed to accept that.
You accept what you want. You tell me what I'm bloody doing to
know.
the children. I'm sticking to my story. I did not do it.
I look back over my career and people ask what's the story I'd most remember. And I think anyone from my era, it'd be 9/11, it'd be the sort of standout story. But if you take that out of the equation, it would be Allit. Just the fact she was a nurse and she was deliberately harming babies and young children.
On all them times I was on duty, do you think I'm going to be so stupid to keep doing it?
I don't know how stupid you are, one way or another.
I've been there for a lot of the occasions when these babies have gone off. A lot of them, probably apart from about 3 of them, which I haven't been there for. And they all keep saying, "Oh, you've got something on you," but does it? But when it happens, I feel like I want to leave because everyone sort of looks at you and looks to say, "Oh, are you doing something to them? Are you feeding them wrong?" Or
are you making mistakes?
I hope not.
I'm Phil Booth. I'm a journalist who at the time was working at the Lincolnshire Echo. We first found out about the case because I knew Neil Jones very well, who was a police officer working out of Boston at the time. I knew how serious it was because Neil and his brother Paul are both sort of larger than life and very jocular characters, extremely experienced and very, very good police officers.
Switch her off, come on. Oh. Hi then, how are you? All right, mate, how are you? Yeah. Have you had a look at the land? Yeah. Did you bring any bait? I brought some port. Oh, well, that's all right. Have you fished here before? Me? Yeah. Oh, about 30 years ago.
They dealt with everything. They'd seen people from all walks of life. I mean, Lincolnshire was never a sort of criminal hotbed, really, but they'd seen enough at Neil and Paul. They knew what people were capable of. But Neil was, I think, quite shocked at what they were finding out. As they found out more, he got more and more bewildered by it, I think.
We both joined the police force basically on the same day.
If you remember, there was 23 incidents, there was 13 children over 8 weeks.
Well, the chart on the wall that we'd got at that time was on Paul Crampton.
That's right. The whole of the inquiry was centred on Paul Crampton because that was the only one that Professor Hull had give evidence of.
Yeah, but Neil, I'm just telling you that the only one we had on the board was Paul Crampton.
Yeah.
And the chief came along and I took him through the whole chart, and at the end of it he said, "Jonesy, you're chasing rainbows."
My name is Daniel Allen. I'm a freelance journalist. I was formerly a mental health nurse a very, very long time ago, which is how I got a job at Nursing Standard way back in 1990. I was very much a rookie, yeah. You know, we were not breaking stories like this. We were kind of picking up on them once they'd been reported in the newspapers. As soon as reports began to emerge that a nurse had been arrested and was being investigated for these crimes, you know, that's when there became a kind of growing consciousness among all the journalists who I worked with that, oh my God, this is a nurse who allegedly has been committing these crimes.
I likened all the things she did to a kind of a spree killing event rather than a serial killing, because she was in this one emotional place that she never came down from. She absolutely knew the game was up. She wasn't a stupid person. She knew the game was up. And sometimes with people like that, they want to go out in a blaze of glory. They want everything to carry on and to keep getting that attention. And that whatever was motivating her in the hospital had not gone away.
Get it through to nobody, and I tell you what, no matter what you say, I'm sticking to my story. I did not do it, and that is the whole bloody truth, and it'll always be the truth. You'll never get another word that you won't hear nothing about that from me.
But it's in your interest. If it is what I suspect, or the line of question I'm taking, it's in your interest not to tell the truth, isn't it?
Not to tell the truth. I'm telling the truth.
If what I suspect is the truth, i.e., you administered something unlawfully to Paul Crampton, or caused some illness for these other children,
I didn't.
It's in your interest not to tell the truth, isn't it?
No.
Isn't it?
No. I'd tell the truth. I'm not going to lie to you.
I don't think you can't understand the question.
If you talked to her about a medical problem or what was happening, she was straightforward, answered the questions. She didn't even hesitate. She had an answer, and she remembered most of the children most of the time, the individual incidents. But as soon as she got into accusing her of something, she was then much more defensive. I've not done this, I never would hurt anybody, this will ruin my career, and I don't want to ruin my career, this is my life, and all the rest of it.
Do you know what causes hypoglycemia?
Diabetes.
Well, apart from that.
No, I don't. I'm not very well up on diabetic stuff anyway. No. All I know that if it was given insulin, that would make his sugar go down.
If it was given insulin, is that what she said? So she's referring to the child as it.
Wow. Yeah, callous, wasn't it? Incredibly callous. There's no language in there that's even remotely soft or caring.
We think about nurses as being kind and considerate. When I first heard her use it in reference to a child, I put that down to what we call psychological distancing. Something can be so difficult for us that we use it rather than he or she or her, just so that we've got that distance between ourselves and whatever it is that we're referring to.
I've never heard a patient referred to as it before. It's clearly a shocking thing to say and a shocking way for a nurse to perceive her patients.
And you accept that you're in custody, amongst other things, for the suspected attempt murder. You accept that now?
I accept that, yeah.
Which is a very serious allegation. And
I'm aware.
You're aware. And obviously these questions might be quite pointed and they might be quite direct, and I appreciate you're under some pressure. So if it takes you a long time to think about it, then fair enough.
It doesn't matter how long you give me to think about it, I won't be able to tell you the exact time. I could go away for a year and come back and say, I'm still no wiser. I could go home and think about it and I still won't be no wiser. What's good for thinking?
She's sitting in that interview, being interviewed about potential murders, and she is completely contained and controlled and calm, and she does not seem to be fazed by any of it. She takes control where she can, and it's like she knows more than the police do. And at some level, it's almost like she wants them to know that she knows more than they do, and she's quite happy to correct them, to talk over them. So she's almost like the dominant person in the room.
Sick and fed up of being in it.
Nobody wants you to say anything you've done that you haven't. At the end of the day, everybody wants to get to the bottom of this and get the truth.
I know, and so do I. And I'll tell you what, when I found out who bloody did it, having me in here all this pissing time, I'm fed up.
Didn't she show a little bit of herself there? She did. The anger does reveal her, doesn't it? That clip shows her losing her control, losing her calm. And some of that arrogance and anger comes out. That inflection on the word me. Got me here pissing about. I think that shows more than anything in any of the interviews the real Beverley Allit. Me. I'm the important one. We're talking about dead children and she's saying, you're keeping me here.
Once Beverley was arrested, she was then put on bail. There was obviously pressure to keep the inquiry tight, but the only real evidence we had was on Paul Crampton. My brother Paul would be given the task of tie and trace, interview, eliminate, and I should look at the medical files and try and find evidence for each and every one of the children. And Beverley went to live at Peterborough with another nurse who was her friend and her parents.
You would think that somebody who's been bailed, suspected of a very serious offence, would keep their head down, would not want to get into any more trouble. But that suggests that Beverley Allit thinks like the rest of us, when she absolutely doesn't.
Strange things were happening there. There was a fire in the toilet. Mattresses were cut. The dog ended up being poisoned and laying on the lawn, frothing at the mouth. The grandson was given hypoglycemic tablets, collapsed on a shopping trip. And eventually the mother of her friend came to us, and so we then interviewed her and got more information about Beverley's activities.
So your first arrest, Bev, which was on the 21st of May, we understand that because of pressures from the press that you went to live in Peterborough, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, whilst you were there, a number of strange happenings occurred, and we'd like to ask you some questions about them. Okay. In particular, I'd like to ask you about an incident that occurred on the 4th of August.
I'd just like to say that I've been interviewed at great length many, many times, and I'm therefore very sorry to say, but My solicitors and legal advisors advised me to say nothing whatsoever.
But we wasn't even aware of these things were going on until obviously it got too much for the family to cope with, and then we were told, and then she was rearrested for those cases. Together with the other one, which we found, which was Dorothy Lowe, which was the 80-year-old lady in a nursing home.
I wish to talk to you today about Dorothy Lowe. She was an elderly resident at Lancaster House Nursing Home, Waltham-on-the-Wold, and I'm arresting you on suspicion of the attempted murder of Dorothy Lowe. This was during the night of the 26th of April, 1991. I understand that you were a bank nurse employed by the British Nursing Association and that worked a night shift at Lancaster House on the 26th of April, 1991.
No reply.
Dorothy Lowe is an elderly lady and she's a diabetic. Do you recall her?
No reply.
Her condition has been diagnosed as a severe hypoglycemic attack. Why should she have had this attack?
No reply.
Do you know anything about the cause of this attack?
No reply.
Beverley was moonlighting at the local nursing home, and she was seen at 3 o'clock in the morning with a syringe in her hand by a cleaner.
And she'd injected Dorothy, and then Dorothy ended up in Grantham Hospital. She only survived because she was given glucose to offset the injection of insulin.
Did you give Dorothy Lowe any medicine during that night shift of the 26th of April 1991? Was it your intention to kill her?
No reply.
Dorothy Lowe, the only one where she was actually seen, if you like, with a smoking gun, when at 3 o'clock in the morning she got a syringe in her hand and she was seen by the cleaner, and she was found not guilty of that offence.
I remember she was found not guilty. She was also found not guilty of the
That's right. So these were the ones outside the hospital environment, weren't it?
After she was charged, she was kept in the police station at Grantham overnight because she was due at Grantham Magistrates Court the next morning. Bizarre, basically, is one word to describe how she was when she was charged with these offences. It included 4 murders of children, 9 attempted murders, 9 offences of GBH with intent, and she stood there as if you were just reading out a train timetable or something to her. There was no emotion on her whatsoever, no reaction whatsoever, no comment, nothing. It's as if, well, there was nothing in her mind to me that was emotionally, that was coming into force, accepting what she's done, because I don't think she had any emotion at all.
With all these facts we've put to you, surely you've got something to say about those children.
No reply.
I went home that night and I couldn't sleep because of all this that was buzzing around in your mind. I remember laying awake half that night thinking about it. I go to the police station early the next morning and the station sergeant sees me and says, well, yeah, can you go and fetch her and bring her up? I go to the cell door, look in. She's laid out on the bed, which is just a thin mattress, and she's asleep. And I had to knock on the door to wake her up. And I said, you were asleep? Have you just fallen asleep? And they're like, oh, no, I've had a good night's sleep. I was amazed at what her reaction was like. She was more than happy to get into the police van. We got into the police van. She was driven to court, me at the side of her. And whilst I'm sort of sat in the background trying to avoid all the press and didn't want my photograph taken, she's leaning, looking out of the van this way, that way, with a smile on her face. Really enjoying the moment.
Today, the police said when Allit was arrested, she remained calm and composed at all times.
We first heard of the name Beverley Allit around the time of the arrest. We knew obviously nothing about her. That quickly changed when we went to Grantham to find out who she was. We found out a lot of people had concerns about her going back to when she was very young. There'd been various incidences that were not in themselves serious, but had made people concerned and thinking there was something not quite right about Beverley Allit.
And as this inquiry goes on, you know, the opinion that myself and some of the colleagues have reached is that there's one person's got reason to tell lies, and it's yourself. Hence you're here in custody being interviewed.
I know. I agree with that, but I tell you what, I'm not...
What, you agree you've got reason to tell lies?
I don't agree. I agree with what your point is, but I just can't get it through to nobody. I am not bloody lying. I wouldn't do it.
I'm Dr. Heidi Hales. I'm an adolescent forensic psychiatrist. I think it's complicated for Beverley. If you seek a caring role, she's put herself in a position to care for the vulnerable, which then enables her to do what she did. So one could argue that maybe that meant that she found herself a position in order to be able to look after vulnerable people and take advantage of them.
But you were, Bev, weren't you? That's
I was
the thing.
there, yeah.
You was there when another
And
child had a problem.
I just wish I wanted a nurse, you know.
Well, it's your whole life, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. What I wanted to do and what I've got and my hopes for the future, that's all that's making me bloody go on. I'd have committed bloody suicide, I'm sure. Having this put to me.
Initially, Beverley was at the Pilgrim Hospital at Boston. But because of her sickness record, and she actually had 40 days sick in 1 year, and she did all sorts of strange things to herself, that she missed out on her sick children nursing. Now, Grantham Hospital was struggling for nurses, and they were advertising for a staff nurse, but they couldn't get a staff nurse.
Doors were kind of open for her to find a way to get her to become a nurse without proper checks being done. I think she was given a contract as a qualified nurse before any police checks had been done, even though she was going to be working with children. The sickness record was not checked. References were inadequate. Lots and lots of corners were cut to get her onto the ward because they needed another pair of hands. The consequences of that were enormous.
She started about the December and she was arrested in the May. And I'm certain that if she had been left to her own devices, she would have carried on, causing harm to these children.
No matter what you say about no matter how much you don't believe me, and I know you don't, I don't care. What I say, that's all I've got to offer you. I can't do nothing but tell you the truth. I can't bloody lie to you. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you for days on end while I get questioned.
Initially, when she came in, I said she was a young woman, but she never ever showed any, as if she was intimidated. Her head wasn't down. She didn't seem nervous. When these interviews end, she turned into a bold, strong woman.
You haven't got evidence to say I injected him.
No, we've just got the...
Well then, if you haven't got evidence to say I did it, I didn't do it. So there's no evidence to say I did do it, is there?
When she looked you in the eye, you gave her the same stare back. I mean, I knew what she'd done, and I knew what I was facing there, but she wasn't showing any remorse, no empathy, nothing at all. It was just purely, you prove it.
I wish to point out that I have cooperated fully with the police, having previously been available on the 2nd of July 1991 for further interview by arrangement between the police and my solicitors. I have been under great pressure because of the vast amount of media attention on me, and in this case I do not therefore wish to answer any more questions.
She was given the opportunity to give an explanation and say that this had been a mistake, she had been under great pressure, she had done these things but not deliberately.
finished your training, you failed 2 interviews, and you're effectively unemployed. You're smiling. Is it funny? Is it light-hearted? Don't you take the interview serious?
No.
I don't think it's funny. I'm sure there's parents don't. Parents who are prepared to offer you the responsibility to be godmother to their children. Parents of children you murdered.
Have you got any feelings for them at all?
No reply.
Beverley Allit likes to tell people what to think. She likes to centre herself. She likes to show you how clever she is. She's got this amazing recall that she likes to give too much information and take centre stage. She would not have been happy with the advice to go no comment or to say no reply. But I think her solicitors did give her the right advice, because every time she opens her mouth, she trips herself up.
This interview went on for, well, I did 5 hours, other officers did 2 or 3 hours, and we never got anywhere. And so it did get very frustrating early on, but when it came to no replies, you knew then that there was no issue, because she didn't want to answer, we'd got the evidence, and it was a matter for a court and a jury.
In May of 1993, 2 years after the deaths of the children, Beverley Allit went to court. It had all the ingredients of a trial that was going to attract an awful lot of attention. And that is duly what happened.
She wants a day in court. I mean, wow, a court is like a circus for a psychopath. Most of the time, people like Beverley Allit want to conduct their own defence. I don't think she didn't want to go down quietly. She wanted to go down in a blaze of glory.
The trial was a difficult time. From an emotional perspective more than anything else. Clearly there are parents in that court who had suffered tremendously at the hands of Allit. They'd lost a child, so a very emotional experience. And clearly there was quite a press frenzy at the time. It was a very difficult and very emotional period.
My name's Stanley Burnton. I was a High Court judge and then a Court of Appeal judge. These were the most terrible crimes, virtually the most terrible crimes imaginable. Worse crimes by a medical profession could not be imagined. The impact of these crimes was just enormous.
The things I remember about Allit during the trial, she'd clearly lost a lot of weight. I don't remember her showing any signs of emotion whatsoever. A bit distant, a bit distracted. Someone there with showing no facial expressions, as I recall, at all.
Unbelievable. We could not believe what she's being accused of, having known her all her life and the rest of the family.
The trial did expose her crimes in detail. The evidence of her crimes was public. So far as the mental element, why she committed them, how it came to be that a nurse could commit such crimes, I don't believe that was fully exposed at trial.
You have got a problem, or...
I tell you what, I'll see a psychiatrist if you want. If that will do it, then I'll see one.
Now, what
And I'll talk to them, and I tell you what...
I'll just say, if you have got a problem, then this is the
There is
time to
no
get it sorted
problem.
out.
No way. I've got too much to... I want to head for a lot. And I'm not throwing it away this far in my training. No way. Not for anybody.
I think Beverley Allit did love drama. She loved being at the centre of things, not necessarily the direct focus, because clearly that would have implicated her in the crimes, but being in the thick of things, so the crash team being called, activity that's generated when the crash team arrives and the attempts to save a life. You know, being interviewed by the police, all these things are really, really high drama. And you know, maybe in that one begins to see just a little glimpse of what might have motivated her.
What's the motive?
Sorry? What's the motive for doing it?
You are trying to establish yourself as a competent nurse.
I'm not competent, far from it. No, I'm one of the crappiest nurses out.
At her trial, it was suggested that she was suffering from a mental illness referred to as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And I think that the public were really keen to have an explanation for this. They needed reassuring that this couldn't happen again, and if there was another Beverley Allit somewhere else, that she could be spotted, because we know what illness she had. And I think everybody felt reassured by it having a name. But I don't think that Munchausen syndrome by proxy, for me, describes what happened at all.
The evidence before the trial judge had been that she was not in any way malicious, sadistic, but just had this illness which drove her, compelled her to do the terrible things that she was convicted of.
Munchausen's, now known as factitious disorder, is when you induce your own illness or do something that makes other people think that you're unwell. Factitious disorder by proxy describes a behaviour of inducing an illness in another person you're caring for. It doesn't always quite describe why you would do that. What it tells us is that somebody has induced this illness in somebody else for a reason. I can understand how Beverley Allit's case can be linked to factitious disorder by proxy, but it's not something I've come across before. The factitious disorder by proxy is more unusual. The factitious disorder is more common, but to have them together is unusual just because they're not common.
She damaged herself and brought attention to herself. And then it was transferred to these children.
The jury came back to court today after 6 nights in a hotel to return their final verdicts. As they did so, families in the public gallery hugged each other with relief. "Lock her in a cage," shouted one woman.
When the guilty verdicts came back, no one was really surprised. Having heard the evidence, I think everyone expected the guilty verdicts, and everyone was very relieved when they came back in.
A minimum term of 30 years, which was then a very long time, determined by the trial judge. It's a life sentence.
It was an enormous shock when she was eventually arrested, and even more of a shock when she was found guilty.
It fell to me to review the sentence of Beverley Allit. But I had new additional material about her, in particular, psychiatric reports that had not been available before. And I had arguments on her behalf, really seeking to reduce the 30-year period The evidence before the trial judge concerning her state of mind and illness was accepted in a way which, in retrospect, it perhaps should not have been. And I did have before me quite extensive psychiatric evidence, which led me to come to a rather different conclusion. The impression one had from the evidence at trial was that she was a person who did not derive pleasure from what she was doing. Whereas the evidence before me pointed to her actually deriving pleasure from what she was doing. An extremely harmful personality. Not to say she was not mentally ill, she clearly was mentally ill. But the illness was rather a different illness from that which had been appreciated when she was originally sentenced. And that gave rise to very difficult questions so far as the sentence was concerned.
Taking a life is an extreme action. Each time you do one thing, you get accustomed to it. Taking one life is a bigger action than taking several lives, because you go past the body boundary. So you've passed that boundary of thinking, is it okay or not to do that? So to do something twice, you've already okayed in your mind that it was okay to do. And if you haven't been caught, and if in fact you've had some adulation and some reward for it, or people have looked after you, then that will be reinforced in that behaviour. So you'll then stop thinking it was wrong. If you have a drive to do something, why would you wait? Just get on and do it. And then if the response is a response that feeds you, you'd do it the next day and the next day. Why would you not? Because that's, if you're seeking something, you behave in a way that gets that reward, you carry on doing it.
So when you met Bev, what did you think? I visited her on probably 3 or 4 occasions. While she was in the cell, she made various complaints about members of the staff not getting this, not getting the other. But she seemed to be sort of very cold. She didn't speak.
Yeah, but I think she was just malicious and sly. You've dealt with people you know are really vicious and criminals at heart, and you wouldn't turn your back on them.
Yeah.
No, she was much slyer and devious than that.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
But she didn't come over that, but she just came over cold to you.
Yeah, just came over cold and clinical.
It's very, very difficult to forget Beverley Allit and what she did. I think about her now and locked away presumably for the rest of her days, and I wonder, go back to that question of why. Why did you do it? A lot of people go through things, and the vast majority of them don't become murderers and don't become serial killers. And she was so ordinary.
There does seem to be an escalation in her behaviour. If it started with self-harm, minor injuries, and then went on to needing a full operation, which is a step up from minor injuries, then was a variety of harming vulnerable people and killing them. And so you can kind of see a pattern of getting a more extreme behaviour to get a response. Within her, it might be that her emotions are all over the place, and it's about her controlling the environment and getting that response back to help her feel in control and feel cared for.
In a couple of years, she could come up for parole. I don't think she'll ever come out. She's a serial killer, and there aren't many people who callously attack defenceless, vulnerable children that they're supposed to be in care of.
I think that if you think about a child killer, you'll think of Bev Allit.
Yeah.
So I don't think she should ever come out.
No, not do I. She's just evil.
The responsibility for the crime, the evilness committed on the one hand, and mental illness on the other. That was what I tried to do in my judgment, and I arrived at the conclusion she entirely deserved 30 years incarceration, one place or another, for the crimes of which she'd been convicted. It wasn't easy because she was a very manipulative personality. Someone who did not want to be in prison, who would prefer to serve her sentence, if she was going to be detained, in hospital, where conditions no doubt would be rather more pleasant so far as she was concerned.
Well, she's in Rampton, so it's a mental hospital, isn't it? But she has her own room. She does her knitting and darning or whatever she's going to do.
She doesn't deserve to be there. Whether it be a medical problem or anything like that, I don't care, you know. I've said it before and I'll say it again, some people are evil.
Now, after she'd been found guilty some time after, she admitted the offences. And one does wonder whether that decision of hers to admit them was in part influenced by her desire to be in hospital and to be recognised as mentally ill. Whereas, of course, if she were innocent of the offences, there would be no reason for her to be in hospital. One has to remember that either way, she has no freedom.
What I'd rather tell you, I'd rather just say I bloody did it, even if I didn't, just to get away.
At that time, that was the most significant inquiry that I'd ever worked on. And although I dealt with major inquiries, probably more so in the latter half of my career, this is the one that sticks in your mind and that you relive time after time again. And particularly for me, on her birthday, probably because of all the tape-recorded interviews. Because at the beginning of them all, it's always the name, age, date of birth and occupation. And the times I heard her birth date, the 4th of October 1968, and I can say with 100% that every year on the 4th of October do I think of Beverley Allit.
Look at all these facts we've put to you. We've spoken to you individually about each of the children. Surely you've got something to say about those children.
No reply.
Well, I saw Beverley Allit as a rather pathetic figure, really, and when we listened to her medical evidence, we probably could conclude that these tragedies were inevitable.
It's not the end of the story for the children who died, the parents of, and the families of the children who died. They bear that scar for the rest of their lives. We don't have to do. We can close that particular book, put it behind us, and move on with the rest of our lives. Not everyone can do that, and that's tragic.
These were multiple murders and attempted murders of young children whose lives were snuffed out almost before they had begun. The offences were a terrible breach of trust on her part, and all the victims were particularly vulnerable because of their age and, of course, by reason of the fact they were in hospital under her care. By her actions, what should have been a place of safety for its patients became not just a place of danger, but if not a killing field, something close to it.
Perhaps you didn't intend to harm, or cause them serious injury, or indeed kill. Perhaps you were mistaken in the dose, or the administration of any drugs that you were given, namely insulin or potassium. Only you know that. We don't. Nobody under those other staff know, no doctors know, no parents know, no solicitors know, no policemen know. Only you know. So we have to assume, in the absence of your explanation, probably all were deliberate and intentional. Attempt murder or murders. Is that what we have to do?
No reply.
The only person with the real answers is yourself, isn't it?
No reply.